Welcome to Everything Happens in the Conversation. Let's chat about today. We're chatting about love. and My guest today is my friend from Saskatchewan, right?
That's right. Yeah.
I have a hard time. I have the French accent when I say that. Saskatchewan.
Yeah. Well, that's fine. It gives it a little bit of, you know,
Pizzazz.
yeah. I was gonna say, yeah, I'm not one of the people who's across the pond. So we're in the same country, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. For people that don't know you, ladies and gentlemen, this gentleman here is a Kalem Fergusson, and Kalem, can you tell people a little bit what you do up in your neck of the woods?
What do I do in my neck of the woods? I do a lot of humaning.
Humaning, eh?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Um, I'm imagining you're referring to what do I do professionally?
yes, please.
Yeah. Okay. Um, well, a personal and professional coach, and with a focus on, leadership, business. Um, Recently, more of a focus and actually looking to veer my practice. I still want to work with influential business leaders, excuse me, and and business owners, but I want to veer into working with media influencers. So that's new for me. But I mean, all around, it's just been a lot of coaching.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, a lot of people will ask, like, well, what kind of coach are you? What exactly do you do? And there's just so many ways to answer that question. And I think the meaning gets lost in the words. So the simplest way to put it is I just help people operate at their best more of the time.
Nice. I like it.
So yeah.
Okay. Well, for those of you listening, Caleb and I are doing Super Coach Academy together, and we are talking about the three principles: mind, thought, consciousness, quite a bit. We've been having that conversation, and we've been looking at the nature of things. And today, that's why we're actually looking at love. And um, I'm not sure if people listening are expecting to hear love in the sense of relationships or just love. Um, like I find that there's relationships and there's love. I kind of like separate them. I don't know about you, but I have like a separation between them. So I love in the sense that what I see of love is that it's acceptance of what is. Like I have it, that's how if I had to identify what love was, that's how I would label it, I guess. So I was kind of like just reflecting on that a little bit before we came on, and that's what came up.
Hmm.
What about you?
Well, for me, like, if we're just looking at, the overlying, like, what is love, I don't think that love can't exist in life. Like, I think that it's always there in some regard. And so if life is just life and love is a part of that, I don't see how love and relationships can be separate. Because in some way, shape, or form, love is always present.
Mm-hmm.
even if we're not present to it. That's what I see about that in this moment. Ask me in a week, I might have a different answer. So when you were talking about what people might be expecting us to talk about, it's probably going to go to relationships in some sense, because it's the most common way for people to understand what we mean by love, even if we're not speaking to just the feeling or the emotion of which people call love. Mm-hmm. Like that good feeling. I think what you're pointing more towards is like, what is love at its essence? Like what is love in its purest nature? That's the kind of understanding I got when you proposed talking about this, and just based on, you know, the beginning of the conversation. So I think love is just kind of a natural space that's always available to us. I think, and I mean, we've heard it a million times, is like it's what we're made of, and it's the space we rest into when we kind of fall out of or give up the illusion that, you know, anything else is true, whether it be our thinking, and that, you know, this is the relationship bit for me. It's funny because last year I'd gone through, at the time, what I thought was a pretty difficult separation in a relationship I was in. And I was astounded at, one, how quickly, and two, how much afterwards there was still a sense of love for everyone involved and for me. And that it didn't mean anything about how I still felt, or it didn't mean anything about, you know, how much work I had to do still to heal or anything like that. And I think for me, this first started one day as I at this point, you know, I've always been pretty good, like spending time with myself. And this is one of the times I hadn't been in a relationship, and it was already a few years. And I remember going and just spending time with a community of people, and then coming home and feeling like I had fallen in love, but it wasn't with anything in particular. Like literally everything I looked at, like I was in this space of being in love with life, quite literally. It felt like I was in love with a person, but I had nothing to attribute it to. And that's the first time that I saw experientially that love was a space, not an emotion, and not something that we can attribute to somebody or something outside of ourselves. And that's something I felt called to share.
Yeah, it is. It's beautiful. I mean, it really makes me see how we think that we fall in love because of somebody else, right? We think, oh, this person shows up and like all of a sudden we're in love. But we think it's outside of ourselves. We think it's because of this person. Like, oh, I'm feeling love right now, so it's this person. And if this person goes away, the love goes away.
Yeah. And I find it kind of like, I find it kind of funny even how the language around it, like we are in love, but not because of something within us, right? Like being inside of something. It means we are inside of a space. We never say we are in, like, we never say we are in happiness or in anger or in sad. We just say we're happy, we're sad. And then when we feel love, we say we're in love. Right?
Yeah.
And so if I look at that, you know, it could just be a linguistic thing. I don't know. But at some point, I think that maybe it's because somebody who created that play on words, you know, where that had come to become linguistically popular. someone knew what they were talking about,
Mm.
is that love was more a space than an emotion or a temporary feeling. And that's why it can still exist when we aren't necessarily experiencing a good feeling, right? So if you have a parent with a kid who's struggling, if they're angry with the kid, they would never say, like, even if they're angry with the kid, if they're worried about the kid, like, even if they're not experiencing that good feeling they would associate with love, they still know that they are in that space of love with the child, right? So that's the kind of distinction that I think is useful to draw, because a lot of people have a misunderstanding around love being an emotion and love being a space. And I think that we can become so much more effective when we see the truth of the matter, which in my experience and how it seems to me it is that love is a space, not a feeling or emotion, right? Like we can call the good feelings or emotion love, and that may be just as plausible, but I think that, the truth of the matter is that love is a space that we can spend time in, and when we spend more time there, we're a lot more effective regardless of what state we're in.
Mm. When you say it like that too, what it makes me see is that when we qualify the love as a feeling, the feeling comes from thought, right? Like we know that our feelings come from our thinking, and we also know that our thinking disappears. That's kind of like where the misunderstanding comes. So when that all of a sudden we're no longer in love, right? It's because it was probably thought made, right?
Yeah. And that's a good point. Like I love that, because like you said, so if that's the thing, is like thinking is transient and variable. And like when we're looking towards universal truth, the essence of universal truth, the nature of universal truth is that it's solid, it's not variable, it's ever present, right? And if love is that, then there's no way that love can change. Our feelings can change because our thinking changes, right?
Yep.
But that is not love at its essence. We might call it that, but really what it is it's just feeling. It's feeling charged with whatever state of mind,
Yeah.
we've got going for us.
The other day I was having a conversation with somebody, and the person said, truth is eternal. And I thought that was such a great way to explain it, to know when you're really looking at truth, it's eternal. It's like it's there forever. It doesn't go anywhere. Like I could see how, my love for my mother is eternal. Like I'm gonna love her like I'm in that space. It's in a space with her. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. I'm just kind of, thinking about like the only thing that can keep us from thinking that we are made of love, that we are made of this, that is that is a natural space for us. The only thing that can keep us from seeing that is when we are caught up in our thinking that life is any particular way, and that really we think is true. And what I mean by that, like, for example, it's like when I'm operating under a premise as to what I think is true about life, I'm consistently looking for proof and evidence for that premise to be true. And even like the thing is, the proof and the evidence I'm looking for is made up because the premise is made up. But as long as I'm living in that premise and it looks true to me, everything I do and me looking for that proof and how I act and respond to the world makes complete sense. The only place it doesn't make sense is because the premise is made up. But if the world were actually that way, in which when we're operating under false premises, it is that way to us, it makes sense that we respond to the world the way we do. What doesn't make sense is the premise because it's made up. And so that's the only thing that keeps us from seeing the truth we're talking about, to the best of my understanding and insight into this so far. I'm just kind of going in the moment with what I'm seeing. So does this make sense? I feel like I'm just like piecing words together.
No.
Because I don't know how to put language to it sometimes.
No, it makes sense. It brought me to I have a picture of Jasmine when she was like 2. Jasmine is me. So I have a picture of myself on my laptop, and I look at her sometimes and I kind of go, wow, I remember when I was a kid, my mother, I was brought back by the cops like 2 or 3 times when I was like 2 or 3 because she would have lost me because I was gone exploring, and I was like, I had a boyfriend when I was 2 or 3 and I was like taking walks with him and I was exploring nature and all of that. And, it was just, there was an innocence about it. There was a purity to it. And I see that in kids, children are just like, they love like almost instantly. And they don't have any thinking about it. Mm. They're not like, I feel like when we were born, it was pure love. It was like, here's a ball of love in your arms, and then you could see it without, because they didn't have language, right? They didn't have language to put words on what was going on. It was just going through them. It was just like, oh, I'm hungry. I'm going to cry now. I'm going to get something. I don't know if I make sense now. It's my turn.
No, it's funny because while you were talking, I had something pop up and then you said something that was so perfectly relatable. And so, yes, in short, it does make sense because you said like, it's just so natural in kids, like when we're born, we're born this way, right? And what I see is like when we see that it's not our job to know, when it's not our job to figure this all out, when it's not our job to like know what love is and then implement it, to like when it's not our job to take the responsibility of being loved, it just naturally takes us over. Mm. Like when we're not occupying ourselves with it being our role. And when I say our role, I mean like the little us, like the egotistical, personality driven versions of us. When it isn't our role to be that, we are naturally taken over by what is natural, which is that sort of space of, eternal love that you're talking about. Mm. It is that space of like natural peace and presence, and because we think so much and because our thinking creates our experience, it's a consistent dance between that and whatever feelings and experiences are produced by our thinking. And I think that the level of which I get to experience life as it is based on the level of my understanding of how our experience works as human beings when it comes to our mind and the implications that has for our life and the implications that has for how life works. Now I'm in another place where I'm just trying to find words for what's occurring, and I don't know if it makes a lot of logical sense, but you know, often, and that's I was talking with someone about that today, about how like insight. Yeah, I was coaching a client today, and we were talking about how insight often, like when it really impacts. I'm kind of adapting the French accent. Impacts. um, when insight impacts us, at first, it typically doesn't make logical sense. And so it's funny because I noticed my client would say a lot like, oh yeah, there's something for me to wrap my head around, you know? And then I would stop this person and go, well, what do you mean by that? Like, let's look at that for a second, because some of this stuff is beyond intellectual understanding, and you're gonna lose it if you dig right into analyzing and trying to intellectually understand it right away, right? Like a deeper understanding typically isn't intellectual at first, right? Like for me and the insights and a lot of the people I know, and to the best of, you know, my knowing, not just like experiential knowledge, but just like a sense of inner knowing, the difference is really made and the impact is really made when there's an insight that kind of settles. And then over time, I've become more apt to intellectually understanding it and being able to articulate it.
I get that totally.
But as soon as I jump into trying to intellectually understand something right away, you know, it's not that the impact is lost forever, but the impact can definitely be lessened. You know, it can result in it not settling as much into my bones, and it more becoming a mental thing, something to remember, something to regurgitate, right?
Yep.
And that's the difference between, you know, learning intellectually and learning insightfully. And so to circle this back to love, right, is like we naturally learn insightfully when we're resting in a space of love. Because it's not about analyzing and picking apart and any of that. You know, as much as sometimes it may occur to us that we need to utilize our intellectual mind in order to do something or in order to understand something, you know, that can happen too. I'm not saying there's no merit in using our intellect. But that's just kind of being what I've seen, what I've noticed, and when I look towards truth with a capital T, what it looks like, you know, is that it's that way for everybody.
Yeah, what's coming to me is, you know, learning insightfully is not looking to what you know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's looking to see something new, something that speaks to you. You know, like I feel like I have this place in me where, you know, I hear things and I go, oh man, that just makes sense. Like no matter the words that are said, it just makes sense, you know, and it's not necessarily something I know. But when the words come and I hear the words coming out, I'm like, yes. Like the instant answer is, yeah. You know, that's my feeling when I first heard Michael speaking, Michael Neal. I mean, he'd say stuff and I'd be like, yeah. Yeah. And it was just so simple. There was just no bullshit. You know, there was There was nothing in the way. It was a clean communication. It was a clean, nothing that would trigger my mind, you know, to go, yeah, but, and then I wasn't there, you know. So it's like looking from within, not from what I know. Because if I know it, I know it. It's not an insight.
Mhm.
Seeing from inside. Insight.
Yeah. And yeah, it's just incredible how simple this is, and just how, you know, before you had mentioned you think learning insightfully is more about looking towards what we don't know. Like it's not about looking towards what we already know. And that's just like, I've come to see that is so true, and that it is so all right, you know, for us to look towards what we don't know and for us not to know. You know, it's our nature not to know.
Yeah.
Um, and like that's how we came here, right? Like we have an inner knowing, there's that bit of it, but you know, it's incredible because like my client I was talking about is it's people's first inclinations to run something through like an insight they've never had before or something they don't necessarily know. It's their first inclination to run it through the database to see if they can recognize it.
Yeah.
You know, do I agree with this? Is this, you know, and that just a lot of the time, it being a safety mechanism, it robs us of the impact of insight. It robs us of the impact of, you know, say it has anything to do with the space of love we're talking about, it robs us of the impact of being in the space of love. Is sticking to our guns, sticking to what we know, you know, or specifically in relationship, you know, having this idea that I know the person I'm in relationship with and I know myself,
Mm.
you know, those two concepts put together are one of the biggest limitations. A relationship is an opportunity to get to know someone new every single day, right? A lot of people think they're in relationship with each other, and I love the illustration that Michael does of this. He does it on one of his flip charts. Is people aren't in relationship with each other, that it's their thought bubbles that are in relationship with each other. And when they drop out of their thought bubbles and allow themselves to be present, they actually get to be in relationship with each other. And the thing is, like, a lot of people will go, oh yeah, that makes sense, but it's like, no, if you really experience it, you'll see, like, that's the only way you'll want to do relationships. But because of the nature of psychology and our mind, it's just we get stuck in our heads again sometimes.
Yeah. Hmm.
And it makes sense because, you know, we'll go, wow, this is the only way we want to do relationships. Because what's happening is we're falling into that natural space of love. Doesn't matter what kind of personal thinking this person has or this person has. Like a space of unconditional love means there's total acceptance of each other's personal thinking. Right? It just doesn't matter because it's not two ideologies in disagreement. It's just two human beings. But yeah.
You know what? For some reason, I'm thinking of marriage. Like, you know, the old.
Well, I wonder
like,
why. You know.
I know what I mean is, you know, back, you know, when my mother and father got married, it was like it was for life, you know, and we both live in the same world that we live that together now, right? And we know that, you know, marriage is not necessarily for life, right? But it's interesting to see that, you know, that marriage is based on, you know, thought, based on,
Mm.
it's not based on that space, right? Like perhaps like I look at my mother and my father, Dad, I love you, but I'm going to say something now. Uh, I would have never married my dad, you know.
I hope
Just like,
not.
I love you, Dad. But I'm just saying that, you know, and my mom and dad, you know, they had a hard time, you know, but they still stuck together. They still did it. They, they were still together no matter what, no matter the thought, the thinking that they might have had, you know. It's interesting. It just, that's why I'm telling you, it brought me to marriage. Like, what the heck? And it's like, if there's something that I don't think about is marriage, but it's interesting to see how based on that, you know, it could just be, you know, marriage was based on the thought that how it should have been, how it should be, how it's going to happen, how it's going to turn out, how it's going to feel, how it's going to, whatever it was. And it was not based on that feeling, that truth of it all, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the thing is, like, when we start to see the truth of that, when we start to see the truth of like, yeah, or marriage is technically a concept, but when we start to see the truth of that matter and the truth behind our experience of thought and how that works in our lives, we still get to play it like a game. Like we can still be married and live presently in relationship that way, right? But yeah, like you're talking about what we begin to live in as an imaginary future rather than the present moment.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, I think it's really cool and almost fun to break down a lot of the things that seem really solid in our world and point towards them in essence being made up of a thought. Yeah, I think it's really cool and almost fun to break down a lot of the things that seem really solid in our world and point towards.
It's so funny. Sorry about that.
That's
I,
fine.
I I was trying to see if there was anybody on the live, and there's our friend Georgia. And so I clicked on it, and then you started talking, and I forgot it was you. Thank you, Georgia. See, that's why I don't bring people in, because I lose the thing. I lose my presence. I'm so sorry. I did interrupt you. Where were you at when I interrupt you so rudely?
I think I was done talking, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm sincerely, I think I was finished up talking there. So I'd love to hear what you have to say to what we've been talking about, though. I feel like I've been talking a lot.
No, you've been great. It's been awesome. I can see, like, for me, you know, I always come back to this place where I could, there's this a big thing that happened in my life, which was, you know, me taking care of my mom, because my mom had dementia, and I took care of her, and I was very present to that space, and I was very present to how I was not paying any attention to my thinking, because, you know, whatever was occurring, you know, when you're looking at your mother who's 79 years old and all of a sudden can't hold, you know, her bodily functions, and, you know, doesn't understand why. She was literally, I don't understand what's going on, you know. And I could sit there and have a lot of think about it, you know, like I could go into a panic mode, but I never did. I never went into that panic mode, and I was just like, I was understanding her despair. I was understanding, like, if this would happen to me, I totally get it, Mom. You know, I was letting her be who she was in that moment. And those were I mean, I took care of her like really good for at least 2 years. You know, in the last 6 months of her life, we actually lived together. She lived with me. And it was, it was a space of love. It was a space, it was literally a space of where there was nothing wrong. It was just what was going on and how do we deal with it? Do you understand? Like literally something would happen. How do I deal with it? And if thinking would show up, because I would meet a lot of people and they inevitably had a lot of thinking about it. My uncles, my aunts, my brothers, my father, they all had thinking about it. And then I had to deal with their thinking about it, right? So when they showed up and then they gave me whatever they gave me, I would, you know, thought would come, and then I would bring myself back to the moment, and then I would look at my mom, and then I'd talk to her. So mom, how's it going? How you doing? You know, like I would just, and I would go with the feeling. I would literally go with the feeling. That's all I could do. So I know that space of love exists. You understand? And I know that I lost it for a little bit because of my grief and everything else, whatever it was, my thoughts. You know, I lost it, but it's a beautiful, beautiful place. And you know, like when we began the conversation, I was like, well, we're not going to talk about, I was more like about romance, you know, the romance of it all. I'm kind of like, it's like once I find out that, once I found out that everything I thought a relationship should be was all made up, like I made it all up. And it was kind of like, what? It's like, okay. I felt like it was not useful to talk about it. But talking with you, it really brought me back to, oh, well, you know, I'm in a different space is basically what I got out of our chat. I could see that my space is different. I'm not thinking the same as I did in 1993.
Yeah.
Surprisingly.
And that's exactly it. Like, I don't think we could.
Yeah.
Right. Like life just doesn't discriminate. And there's things that are going to happen that, you know, will, whether or not we have an understanding of the mind, that are going to alter how we think about things, you know. And thank you for sharing that, by the way. Like that for me is a testament to like how love is an ever present, I don't even, is an ever present truth, you know. Like even in those moments, you knew, right?
Yeah.
You knew that it was more about the feeling than it was about any sort of thinking about it. So,
Yeah.
by the way, I'm not sure, you know, when your mom passed, but my condolences.
Thank you. It's 2 years now, so she's with me all the time.
Yeah, well, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that story.
We're actually, as you know, I have many chats that I've booked, and usually we choose a topic of life like this. But on the 11th, I think it is, of June, I'm having a chat about dementia with JJ Hill, and we're actually going to talk about, because JJ, her mother has it, and me, my mother had it, and we both have beautiful things to say about it. So we're going to have a chat about that.
Yeah. Do you know who Brianne Grable is? Or
No.
Grable? I don't know how to pronounce her last name, but she's also in the principals community. She actually wrote a whole book on it. She's got some of the same stuff going on with her mother right now, and she's kind of documented her life and what it's been like from this understanding, and just it's been beautiful seeing it. So I think JJ is connected with her through our mutual friend Christy.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a I mean, connecting with her I think would be beautiful as well. But
Yeah, we can include
I
her.
might have butchered her last name though.
That's okay. That's okay. Okay, I'm not touching anything. Oh, Danny joined, but I can't see him. I don't know how this thing works. So
That's okay.
listen, thank you so much. This was great. I loved it. Thank you for accepting my invitation.
Thank you for inviting me. Yeah, this was a beautiful conversation, Jasmine.
Yeah, I'm gonna send you the video if you want to have it and play with it.
Awesome.
Cut out the part where you're talking in doubles. Okay, I'm gonna check. Okay, I'm gonna check in. I've got a message.
Okay.
This has been beautiful. My father-in-law was happy as he ever was in life when he fell into dementia. Is that what Georgia is saying? Thank you, Georgia. Thank you, Danny, for joining. And thank you, Kalem. And I'm going to disconnect from Facebook, but I want to talk to you just 2 seconds, okay?
Cool. Beautiful. Thank you guys for joining. And for
Bye,
anyone
love.
who watches
Bye,
the
live
replay.
stream.